What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Everyday Ultra Podcast. I'm your host, Joe Corcione, and we have another episode in the Cocodona 250 series that we're doing here on the Everyday Ultra Podcast, where we're interviewing the top athletes racing from Black Canyon City all the way up to Flagstaff in a 250-mile ode to Arizona known as the Cocodona 250. And today, let me tell you, I could not be more pumped about today's episode because this is a runner who I not only admire, but I've just so been inspired by what she has stood for over the past few years on the trail, on her ultra experiences, but also in the way that she carries herself as a leader, as a mother, as a person, as a wife, as a, just insert any adjective in here too. And so you likely know her being in the endurance community as well. She's a runner for Nike Trail. She has done incredible challenges over her incredible career, such as winning the Badwater 135. Last year, she did an impressive feat where she did Badwater, Angeles Crest, and Leadville all within 35 days. And now she's gearing up for Cocodona 250. But not only that, she's also taking on the other Triple Crown of 200s on top of that as well. So, I mean, amazing is definitely an understatement when I talk about today's guest, and we're going to dive into her mindset going to Cocodona, her training, all things about the amazing Sally McRae, who's our guest on the podcast today. Sally, thanks so much for coming on the podcast. I appreciate it.
Thank you. That was such a vastly gracious and kind introduction. Thank you for that. Thank you for
Absolutely. Yeah, no, absolutely. And it is so well earned. Like Sally, like I think when I first started getting to the sport, like you were one of the first people who I kind of stumbled upon. And like, I mean, we were even talking before the podcast, like I not only admire like the way you are as an athlete, but the way that you show up in all areas of your life totally fully. And like the way that you express yourself. I mean, for anyone listening to, like, please listen to the episode that she did with Nick Bear, like where you talk about your story and your background. I mean, it's just, you're just so raw and real and vulnerable. And so I think it just makes you extremely relatable to a lot of people in the sport. And so that's why it's a pleasure to have you on here as well. And so thank you again for that.
Well, I appreciate that. And any chance I get to connect with the community is a real privilege. So thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I'm excited to talk Cocodona with you because this is a new journey for you, right? Like you are well known for taking on these awesome endurance challenges, right? So winning Badwater a couple years ago and then moving on to your challenge last year where you did all those 3 races in 35 days, and going through like all the trials and the tribulations and pushing through that inspired so many along the way. And now you're taking on not only Cocodona, but also the whole slew of the other 200s that are out there. And in one video, when you're talking about your training, you mentioned that you're excited to kind of find your strengths and your weaknesses through the training process. And now as we're kind of getting closer to the race, I'm curious to hear, like, what are some things that came up in terms of finding those different areas that you've taken away from your training?
Yeah, the training for this buildup, I definitely went in a little blinded. I don't think that there is, just one set way to train for a 200. In fact, it's one of the reasons why I decided to do a 200-mile race in the first place, because when I first heard about them back in like 16, I think it was, I told myself, no, that's just a ridiculous distance. Like, how much running are we actually doing when we hit like 200, 250? Like, come on. And I really do love, the challenge that 100 brings. Like how hard can you run 100 miles? And we're seeing as the years go by, the people are running the 100-mile distance faster and faster. I mean, you look at Western states and the times that, the top men and women are running, in the top 10 of each side. It's incredible. I mean, they're running through canyons and altitude and heat. I mean, it's amazing what those times are. So the 100-mile distance has always been my favorite, but the 200-mile distance, I think there was just, it kind of just came at a perfect time after doing the True Strong project. That was a 507-mile project. And I felt like putting five different events that close together, showed me something new about myself. And when it comes down to it, curiosity is the reason why I actually even started ultra running. I was just so fascinated that what the human body can do. So when I decided to sign up for the 200s, I thought, I am an all-in type of gal. And so I thought, I'm not just going to do one. I'm going to make my whole year focused on that, because I've been in the sport now for a long time. This is I'm working towards my 10th year as a pro, and I've been very grateful to have many incredible sponsors over the years that have allowed me to race all over the world, and and being invited to races in places that I only dreamed of going as a little girl. And I just feel like my career has been so full that why not try something that's new? And I think the 200-mile distance, it's starting to grow in popularity. But there's a lot of mystery around it. And I wanted to kind of find out, what the distance is about. But also I really believe there's nothing extraordinary about me. I think that, even doing the Choose Strong project, what that showed me last year is like, this is like what humans are capable of doing. And we're seeing a lot more people, flood the entrance lists of ultras, and people are figuring out like, wait a minute, like we can do some pretty incredible things. We can cover some like extreme distances. We can run in extreme, weather conditions. And so I think that when I started putting together the training program and I looked at, okay, what is this going to take? I looked at all the different variables just about first starting with Cocodona. And I'm a big research person. I'm actually communication studies major. So I'm fascinated just with studying anything I can get my hands on. That's a really big part of my training. It's something that I've implemented more seriously, like in the last 3 or 4 years, because I'm just so fascinated with the mindset of these races. And so I thought, well, if I'm going to be out there for a couple days, what I know to be true about hundreds is there's a point in the race where your body isn't so amazing anymore. It doesn't matter even if you're like winning, you're at the top of the pack. Your body's weary, and you have, all of like the springiness in your step is kind of gone. Again, even if you're winning the race, you have been worn down after 10, 11, 12 hours of running. And there's a shift that takes place. And that shift is that now the mental side of the game starts to become the more dominant way of getting you to the finish line. And so I thought this has to be a really important aspect of the longer we go, the stronger we get. I really do believe that. And I believe that our minds are far more powerful than the physical. Now, I do not train in a conventional way. I've been a coach and a trainer for almost 20 years, but I love to push the envelope. I love to challenge conventional training plans, because I believe that we are all very unique. And, you can put 20 people in a room that all want to run a sub-3 marathon, and I'm going to give them all different training plans, because the variables of who they are and what makes them who they are going to be different. Now, the principles are all the same. And I think a lot of the training principles are the same across all sports, as a gymnast, as a soccer player. And so I really do understand that you need 2 to 3 hard days in a week, and everything else around that has to be like easy and recovery and building you back up. Like it is pretty basic as far as having a good training plan. And so I thought, all right, I'm going to go into, this training program, and I want to find out as much as I can about the 200. So I've watched every single Cocodona video YouTube that's out there. I've watched every single one, and I would watch it while doing like weight vested power hiking on my treadmill. I've listened to every podcast. Joe, yours was one of my favorite. In all my runs, I've listened to podcasts like multiple times. And I think that what I started to learn early on was how much I didn't know. I think that sometimes the more that we learn, and when we really start to, try and harness knowledge and wisdom, we start to understand how much we don't know, and how much that, we need to remain as students. And, at the beginning of the training, I thought, oh man, it'd be fun. Like I'm going to try to race this now that I'm a couple weeks away. And actually I would say even a couple months ago, I thought, this isn't something that I'm going to race. This is something I need to go in as a student, and I need to learn as best I can, because I'm doing 4 of them. And I want to try something different for every race. And, we're doing this YouTube series called Training for a 200-mile Race. I've been sharing my training, but I want to hopefully be helpful to other people too. Like, hey, here's where I totally screwed up. Don't do this, And then like, here's a good tip of something that I learned, or like, but I think that since I'm now 5 months into the training, what I've learned about myself is that one thing remains true. I love to train. I don't think that's ever something that has been, it's not difficult to get myself out there, because I really believe at the end of the day that hard work trumps talent. And that's something that I've known about myself ever since I was a little girl. And so hard work is something that I enjoy doing. And I really want to always stand at a start line knowing that I gave the best that I absolutely could in my training. And so, yeah, I trained hard for this. I don't know if I trained right though. I don't know if I did too much or if I missed certain things. But I ate more than I ever have. I mean, I've eaten a vast variety of food while training. I've done a lot more, like hiking and like power walking than I've ever done in my life, which is so weird because I feel so weird doing it, like with the weight vest on and just like, trying to see how fast I can walk, because it's completely different, like not completely different, but you're using different muscles and giving your body a break from like that hard pounding. And so I thought, if I'm going to go that distance, I need to know, I want to be strong in every possible way of moving forward. So I don't want to be crawling on my hands and knees, but I know that moving forward is walking, hiking, and running. And so I'm not just going to focus just on running far every week. Like I actually need to focus on carrying something heavy and walking as powerfully as I can. So this is the first time in my training where that has become an important part of my training, but I'm not great at it. so so that's something I'll continue to do throughout the year, because it's like my first time doing it. So I have to say I've loved that. I've loved that I have had to put in something new into my training. But I'll pause there because I have been talking so much already.
I could listen to you keep going for like as much as possible, because like so many good nuggets from there, right? So like the first thing on like wanting to learn so much about 200s, right? I love that you like are a student of the sport and like consuming like, all the videos and the podcast. Thank you for the kind words again, by the way. And for like all the information, like wanting to learn as much. And I think it's like that humility and like that ability to understand. It's like, hey, this is a new territory for me, and then wanting to get good at it and like embracing like the newness, like you were saying about doing these power hikes and focusing more on walking, right? Like, because like you were saying, like this is something that's new and maybe something that we're not the best at, but I love how you say like, oh, I love like that process. And so like over the years, maybe like, and you can also talk into like the 200s, but maybe just like, I'm sure like throughout your ultra running journey you've had to like be a beginner in the few times, like maybe for people listening, like how have you always been someone who's just loved like that beginner kind of thing? Because, and the reason why I ask this, because, and I feel this too sometimes, is when we start something new, I'll give you an example. Like I'm training for Canes 100K, which is a lot of climbing. I'm not a mountain racer. And like, same for me, like I've been, hitting the mountains, and that's like new for me. My quads will tell me that every day. But like, I've also struggled sometimes to be like, oh man, like this is like new. So how is like your relationship with the beginner mindset kind of evolved? And maybe for someone listening, what would your advice be for someone who might be like embracing something new, whether it is a 200-mile race or their first ultra?
Yeah, I think that one of the things that makes our lives so fulfilling is that we always have the ability to grow. We
Mm,
have, and in that same breath, we have the ability to always increase strength. Like I love that the human body was made in such a way that you actually can continue even in your 90s into your hundreds, you can continue to build muscle. Now it's always breaking down too. Like our bodies are always breaking down and we're losing muscle and all of that. But it's incredible that if you are always training your body, you're able to continue to build it up.
mm,
And I think that hitting a point in life where you feel like you've learned everything, or you feel like I've 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 met the apex of my strength and this is it. That's actually a really scary place to be, because then it's, then what else is there? And I really believe that for every day that we get up in the morning, there's a purpose for that day. And we really don't know if that's going to be a day that's totally going to change our life, either for the bad or the good. And so to begin that day knowing like today is a new day that I can grow. That's how I approach ultras. That's how I approach like every event, every job. I've had over 20 jobs in my life. I started working when I was very, very young. I'm actually started going to work with my dad when I was in first grade. And then holding my own, like making money when I was 12. So I've always worked. And I think that when you start working as a child, you kind of you're programmed for having to always be learning something. You're not only learning a craft or learning a skill, but you also are constantly learning how to be flexible, how to problem solve. You have to learn how to interact with people and different personalities. And I think that a part of why I love ultra so much is because it's kind of like how I was raised. It's like my childhood story it really parallels with that. And so when I step into like a new race distance, and the cool thing about ultras is like all courses are different, right? You can like totally crush on a road marathon, but I can train for the Berlin Marathon here in Southern California. Like we're running on road. Like there might be a little climb descent here and there might be a little bit of temperature change, but like if I want to go and do a sub 3-hour marathon, like we're looking at a matter of like minutes of maybe being off because, oh, the hill was a little bit bigger or something like that. But with the 100-mile distance, you could race in Utah in 100 miles and like what those mountains have to offer. And if there's snow or if you're running altitude, that's totally different. If you're going to go run 100 miles on the Western States course, it has a totally different, set of variables. And I love that. I love that you actually can't perfect this sport. I love that it constantly beckons us to have to be focused and mindful of the fact that anything can happen on the course, that no two courses are the exact same. And sometimes courses change by the year, depending on the weather, if there's a reroute. And so when I decided just to even start ultras as a whole, I remember everyone telling me, because I would message people on Facebook. I was learning about these ultras and I would write the keyword ultra marathon into a Facebook search. And when names would pop up, I'd message these people blindly. And one of them was Katra, who is like a friend since day one. And of someone I call a friend today. She's amazing. But she like gave me all this information, like trying to help me. But everyone was telling me, if you're going from a marathon, you need to do a 50K. But I thought that doesn't like excite me. Like running 6 more miles, like I can walk that. But like the idea of running 50 miles just sounded insane. So I decided to like, I'm going to sign up for a 50-mile race. And this idea of like, I have to learn that distance. I have to like, it's so unknown and like mind boggling to me. Like, what is that going to be like? Like, what's the adventure that I'm going to go on and what am I going to learn about myself? And so I think with the 200s, and even the True Strong project last year, I knew that once I hit like race 3 or even like race 2, because I went from Badwater straight to Andrews Crest 100, which is kind of insane to put those back to back. But I just knew I'm now embarking on territory that I've never been in before. I've never felt so wrecked. And now I'm going to have to go and do, another 100 miles on a really difficult course. And I think that the 200s, I'm at that place again where, okay, I have to be a student. I can't say that just because I've done 100-mile races or because I won Badwater that I'm going to be awesome at this distance, because it's clear that there's other things going on. And I think the more that I talk to people, and the more that I listen to other people that have gone before me and done these races, I think, oh yeah, I haven't been in that situation. So I would be really foolish to think that just because I'm fit and I can run far and I can lift some weights that, that I can conquer this. Because dude, when you look at like the average pace per mile, like at first, I think I was fascinated too. So I'm like, dude, 3.5 miles per hour like that, I can walk that. But now, like the more that I like, okay, that was like so prideful. Like now that I've researched and listened and like all the things that are happening in the race, I'm like, okay, that's actually fast.
Yeah,
A
for
mile per
sure.
hour is actually fast.
It's crazy. It's like a whole right? Because like, and you look on paper, and it's like even so, like you can see like people start even dwindling towards the end and get even slower. And like, I mean, even if you look at like Joe Splits, who won last year, I mean, like he was pretty much like power hiking a lot of like the uphills and just kind of like not moving fast at all. It's a whole different world. So you kind of touched on. First of all, I would just want to say I love your approach to just always having that beginner mindset. And someone as accomplished as you, right? Like doing the Choose Strong project, having all the wins and the podiums and the challenges under your belt. Even with all those, you still are saying, "Hey, like I need to learn. I need to get better. I need to educate myself." And that is just such an awesome mindset to have, right? Because like I know I've been in positions like in myself where you almost like rest on your laurels a little bit where you're like, oh, like I've done this, and this. And then you completely overlook maybe some of the small details of the challenge ahead. And then, reality hits you in the face. Like I've been there many times before. And so I love that approach from you. I'm curious, like, so you talk about like the hiking and your training a lot and like seeing some of the splits on there. Is there anything else like throughout your research and maybe through the training that has just like totally surprised you about this kind of world in Cocodona that you've really also had to dial in deeper on that you've kind of implemented in your training that maybe you didn't think was a thing to think about or know without doing the research that you've done?
Yeah, I think the sleep game,
Mm,
um, and that kind of came pretty soon after I posted that I was doing 200s. I asked the audience, like, if you guys have any questions for me or even any tips or advice, like, send them. So there was like 500 questions, comments that came in from that. And as I was scrolling through them, I was like, wow, so many people are talking about sleep. Like, what the heck? And then I started listening to podcasts and reading like articles. And um, it's fascinating because I think sleep is one of those things that is really unique to people. Like, even in the world of like, oh, I get up early. Like, I always say, hey, get up early. But I also know very well that there are just some people that do way better as night owls. They're like,
mm,
dude, I can stay up till 2 and I'm like super creative. I can get so much done, but I'm not getting up at 4, after that. Like, I have to, sleep until 8. And so it's that idea too of like how well you know your body, how well do you recover. Well, I'm also learning too that, and I've learned this kind of over the years, that like your diet has a lot to do with that. Your diet has a lot to do with your recovery. Your diet and what you're drinking has a lot to do sometimes with
mm,
how you fall asleep and how, and just how fueled you are like throughout the day. And so um this idea of, well, when am I going to need sleep? Because this person only slept for 40 minutes over the course of 250 miles. And then this person slept for like 6 hours over the course of 250 miles. Like, it's really interesting listening to people talk about that. And for some people to say that that is ultimately what either destroyed their race because they
mm,
got it wrong, or what helped them get them to the finish line. And I have not heard a consistency within sleep. And I've asked a lot of people. So like Katra like sent me some really helpful tips yesterday. Dean Karnazes sent me a text today. We were kind of going back and forth and he gave me some incredible tips. And I just feel like even in the podcast, it's everyone has a very different opinion about that. So that is another reason why going into this race, I'm really curious to see how well I'm going to do with that. Because in my earlier years, when I first started ultras, my kids were babies. And I really feel like that young moms actually do pretty well on sleep deprivation because
mm,
you're doing life every day pretty sleep deprived. And I don't mean that in a negative sense. It's just like, that's just how it is. Like, kids' sleep schedules are like all over the place. Some of them are waking up all night. And so maybe you're napping with them throughout the day. But it actually became a strength for me in those early years because it wasn't until last year that it was the first time ever in my career that I hallucinated. And that's been one of the top questions that people have asked me. They're like, have you ever hallucinated? I'm like, no, like I do incredible at night. Like I can run all night. Like I don't need to like take a nap. I don't need to like do anything. Like I'm amazing. But when I did the Choose Strong project, I was never recovered. Like every race, I was so trashed. Like my
mm,
body fighting to, to sleep and to recover. And so I'd say 3 of the 5 attempts, the 3 of the 5 events that I did, I hallucinated. And the first time that I didn't know that I was until Colin, who was pacing me, started making fun of me. And I was pointing things out, like these guys in rafts playing guitars and like these Looney Tune characters jumping around on beach chairs. And it was weird. But I think that was my first time ever where I felt like true sleep deprivation. So
Mhm.
I'm very curious about how I will be if I go into Cocodona rested. Will I be lucky? Because that's what I almost feel like. I feel like, okay, you're lucky if you can say you only took 4 dirt naps and they equated to 4 minutes for all of the race. Like, and then you look at sleep research and it's like, well, man, I don't even know how healthy that is for the long haul. Like, if I'm doing 4 of these races, do I really want to be like Walking Dead for like 10 days out of the year of 2023? Like, how is that going to impact my overall like health? And how are these races actually going to impact my health and long? Is this something that you
Mm.
can be specialized in and race year round in? Or is the 200-mile distance something that's like on the bucket list that you need to do at least once in your ultra career? You can race 50Ks in 50 milers and even 100 miles several times during the year. But how am I like, I can't wait to see how I'm going to be feeling like come December. So sleep is probably like the biggest question mark for me right now, that's something that I feel like I can't control either. But the one thing that that I am doing, and I coached a former, I don't do private coaching anymore, but last year my client, she did Cocodona 250 for the first time and I coached her through it. And I told her, I was like, I want you 4 to 6 weeks before the race to just quit caffeine, like no more caffeine. Let's
Whoa.
see how that, that helps out. So I've been off caffeine for a while now, and hoping that I can kind of use it as like at a very specific time as rocket fuel. I may not have any response to it at all. It could even be adverse. So we'll see if that's going to help. I know it did help my client. And so, yeah, maybe that will help. I know my sleep has been better since I've been off it completely too. Cause I'm one of those like bad caffeine. I'll drink coffee all day, all night. Like if you ask me to go to coffee with you at 5 PM, I'm going getting triple Americano and
Was it brutal to come off that? Like, I mean, like, did you have like withdrawals? Like, cause I'm the same way with caffeine. Like I'm coffee all day guy. And like, every time I'm like, all right, I'm going to like go one day without it, I like tap out. And so like, I admire your strength, but like, man, did you have like withdrawal symptoms beforehand? And like, how do you manage that like with the training? If so, like, I'm curious to hear that.
Yeah, I had two like foggy days. It actually wasn't too bad. But yeah, I had 2 foggy days and then one day where I had like a light headache, but overall I've been fine. So I've just made sure like to get good sleep and stay super hydrated and like
Mm.
like I've just tried to combat it like in a different way. So yeah, I feel good. So hopefully, fingers crossed that there'll be a benefit there, because outside of that, I think the one common thing I'm hearing is just like, don't be afraid of letting yourself sleep,
Mm.
and I think that when you race hundreds, that's definitely not something you put in your plan. Like you don't plan to sleep in 100. If you're racing 100, like you're planning to run as hard as you can until you get to that finish line, and then you'll sleep. So, this is, there might be some strategy in either specifically saying, now I'm going to take rest, which I've heard some people do, or just letting your body do its thing. And if it's like screaming at me to like, hey, Sally, like we need like 10-20 minutes, go close your eyes. We'll try that. So first race is going to be a lot of learning in that area.
That's so awesome. And I remember even you posting about it in Leadville, like when you did that last year during the True Strong project, how like there was that story where like you fell asleep at the aid station. It was Leadville, correct? And you, yes, and you were saying like, this was listening to your body and like you were feeling a little beat up, but you said, hey, I need to sleep right now. And even like some people were giving you like grief for it, which is crazy, but like just given all the stuff that you've been doing. So anyone who's giving Sally grief on that, like shame on you. I'll be the first to say it. But but secondly, I love the message in there of like being able to listen to your body and know when it needs rest so you can bounce back stronger. And I feel like the 200s is like the essence of that. Like but it's so strategic and different, to your point. Like even almost every guest that I come on who has done, 200s or through hikes, the sleep strategy is so different. And it's like, it really comes down to like, hey, like, let's do a long effort and see what the results are, which is like super cool to see you do this and then the 3 events after. So it'll be cool to see it progress along that way.
Yeah, I think the goal is to try something new each time. Because what I don't want is to go in thinking like, I got this dialed in, I'm so fit. Because it isn't, these races, and especially the further you go, it isn't just about how fit you are and how fast you can run. You
Mhm.
want to go in as fit and strong as possible, because that's obviously going to be an advantage in helping you endure. But I think that listening to our body, that is a point of pride. And it
Mm.
is for all runners. It doesn't matter if you're an elite runner, if you call yourself a backup packer. When we have to admit that we have a weakness, or that injury, that's one of the reasons why 80% of runners every year are injured. And I'm talking very minor things to serious things. But those, just those little things that bother us that we ignore because we can run through it, because
Mm.
I'm tough and that's what I do. And like, this is what I do. And I'm not going to let anything get me down. But so often our bodies talk to us, and it's not a sign to shame you or to tell you that you're weak, but actually to tell you, hey, this is where you need to strengthen. And strengthening comes with rest, full rest. Thankfully, we've gotten so much better research, and people are talking more positively about recovery days and rest days. In the past, it was almost like no pain, no gain. Like that was like, dude, if you're not in pain every day and pushing yourself like balls to the wall every day, then you're not going to be the best. And I think that that message is, it's sometimes hard to get out of our head. Social media, as wonderful it is for connecting and maybe finding some inspiration, can really be a double-edged sword.
Mm.
And it's easy to hop on at any time during the day and think, I'm not doing enough. I'm not enough. I think that even on my rest day, I should have done more on my rest day. I went on a walk, but I also should have done yoga, and I also should have went for a swim and a bike ride. None of those things are pounding exercises, but those are all recovery exercises. I should have done all that. And it's just like we forget the unique qualities that make us who we are. And I think that I've had to learn that the hard way. And I think that's why I'm not afraid. I've publicly failed many times, and I'm at a point now in my life, I'm just not afraid to fail. I'm not going to line up at that start line at Cocodona and think that, it's 100% guaranteed that I'm getting to the finish line because I'm fit or I'm fast or I've been doing this for so long. I know in my mind that anything can happen. And the best thing that I can do is just be in control of how I respond. And so when we feel a weakness or when we feel tired, the way that we react to those things says a lot about who we are. And
Mm.
most often than not, we don't want to admit that we need a nap. We don't want to admit that, like, I am so tired, or this hurts, or this is hard, because we see that as weakness. It's a vulnerable place to say that, especially publicly. We see people kind of say that on social media posts, which actually isn't very vulnerable. It's way more vulnerable to say that face to face to a coach. It's way more vulnerable to come into an aid station surrounded by people and say, I am so exhausted and my knees hurt, and to know that, there's live feeds now. So now there's a live feed on you and you're saying this, that's being vulnerable. And that's where we have to face our own pride and know that you sitting in that chair, laying down on that cot, might be the very thing that's going to get you to the finish line. You're just admitting your humanness. And I think when I did that post, I was really wanting to touch at the heart of all of us, really, because I'm releasing a book here in the next few weeks, and it's about the first 18 years of my life,
Mm.
memoir. And um, a lot of the story is about that. I didn't really know how else to operate as a kid except to always be super strong and to kind of put up a front with painful things in my life. And it's easy to have those things conditioned in you so much that it's how you live your entire life. But I don't think it's uncommon. You know, we are more attractive and likable and charismatic when we're smiling and happy and we're strong and everything's going right. Like people want to be around that because people want that. And so I have found that as an athlete, you know, over the years to let go of that. You know, I want to be human. I want real experiences and I want to be honest with the journey. And so when I posted about Leadville, this part actually didn't make it into the Choose Strong film. We did so many interviews, but it was actually a really important part that I kind of hoped would make it into the video. But I talk about how for years I would never talk about, I actually have legit breathing problems. I have lordosis, kyphosis, scoliosis. I have several impacted discs in my lower back. And then I have 6 bulging discs in my neck, and I have a torn ligament, and I have no more curve in my neck anymore.
Oh
But
my
my
God.
rib cage is curved just very slightly, so I cannot breathe at 100% capacity. Now, I didn't grow up with healthcare. We never had that growing up, and we couldn't afford it. And so, obviously, a lot of these things I didn't know about. Some of these things are as a result of trauma, and so it wasn't until 2019 when this sports recovery lab that's one of my sponsors said, "Hey, we're working with this breathing doctor. Do you want to like go to his lab?" I was like, yes. Like my whole life since I was a little girl, I've always wondered about my breathing because and I don't train with a lot of people either, but a lot of times when I would train with people, I would usually only do it during a recovery run or like, are we
Mm.
going easy? Because I breathe so loud, especially like on climbs. Like it's labored breathing that sounds like I have emphysema or there's like something wrong. And I've been in the presence of people in races sometimes where they look back and they're like, dude, are you okay? But it's like, that's how I breathe normally. So Leadville was actually a race I always wanted to do, but I would never do because I would struggle. And I train on 10,000-foot mountains, but I'm only up there for like 5 or 6 hours at most. And so I knew if I'm up there, if I'm at that altitude for 100 miles, I honestly don't know how I'm going to breathe. Like, I don't know how my body's going to respond. And that's the third of the 5 events in the Choose Strong project. I'm going to be so wrecked
Mm.
at the start line. That whole race is going to be such a massive struggle for me. And I think that, you know, when I was kind of like showcasing that last year, I was showcasing in Instagram and it eventually came out in the film. It was really natural that people just thought I was just tired. You know, it was like I'd done Badwater, I did Adja's Crest, and now I'd done, you know, this race across the sky. But I had moments where, you know, and I was telling Eddie, my husband, I was like, I actually have a little bit of fear because I also have a little bit of asthma, but I don't take anything. I don't ever carry anything with it. It's more sport induced. And I thought, what if something happens to me? So I had fear in that race, like real legit fear. And when I came back over Hope's Pass, well, the first time when I hit the halfway point, so you go over Hope's Pass and there's that aid station, I had to sit in the aid station for about 40 minutes. I was so dizzy. I was tripping. I was kind of falling all over the place. And the medical team pulled me into the tent and they're like, you know, you just need to sit here for a while. And I was like, I'm going to be okay. I'm going to be okay. And I eventually made my way out, but I had lost like all this time. And so when I left and I descended and I saw Eddie at the bottom of the mountain, a lot of time had passed and they were really concerned about me. I'd taken this horrible fall because I was so dizzy. So like my knee was all ripped up. And I was in a lot of pain. That went on to like I was in pain with that knee for a couple weeks. But when I finally saw him at the next aid station with only a marathon left to go, I had been vomiting nonstop. I had fallen several times. I couldn't like see straight. I was totally dizzy. And I knew I was just that lack of oxygen, struggling to breathe. And my body was so tired. And I remember Hella at that time passing me. And I just kept telling myself, just listen to his voice and follow his voice. And I was trying to keep up with like the back of him and eventually made it into the aid station. And that's where I told Eddie, I was like, I will not make it to the finish line if I don't reset. And I was just shattered because I'm around all these people too. And it was like the first time that, in a really long time that I had to just come to grips with like, this is something about me that I can't change. Like, this is who I am. It doesn't matter how fit I am. It doesn't matter how much weight I can lift. It doesn't matter how much I train or what accomplishments I've had in the past. This is today, right now. I am weak and I am tired and I can't change how I breathe in thin air.
Mm.
And I have to lay down. And I was shivering like uncontrollably, like everything just started to like spiral. So, yeah, I fell asleep right away. I think I stayed in the aid station for about 20 to 30 minutes. But after that, it was amazing. Like Eddie gave me some espresso and, like I continued on. But, yeah, I've had a lot of things about, my career that early on, you don't want to tell people because that's not anything that you want people to talk about. I don't want that to be like, wow, she's doing all this and she can't breathe and she has all these problems with her back, like I never wanted that to be tagged on to my name.
Mm.
Uh, and it's the same way with like anything. Like I did an episode on what I eat in a day,
Yep.
and I've always said like I don't want to be known for what I eat. Like this is I want to be known for so much more than that. And so no letting people know that like I had, these issues with breathing and like my back was a really vulnerable, time for me. But now I've, like I said, that was back in 2019, but I've moved past that. And people reach out to me all the time because back problems are they're pretty common,
Mm.
regardless if you're a runner or not. But I think that is also why it's very easy for me to enter into anything that's new or a new season and be a student because I have blaring weaknesses about me that will be with me for the rest of my life. And it's not how can I make this weakness go away? It's how am I going to react to it? How can I
Mm.
best with it? And that's one of the top reasons why I strength train so much. It's because that's what helps me not live in physical pain is
Wow.
stronger than the pain.
Oh
So
my gosh. Well, I appreciate you sharing that incredible story. And it takes so much vulnerability, not just to share it, but to actually, like you said, like live that moment, right? Like the true vulnerability is not like just going out and expressing these things. It's going into that aid station, like you're saying, with a bunch of people around and, knowing when to stop, right? Like, and I love how you mentioned in the beginning of that saying nowadays strength is like almost seen as like push through at like all costs, but it's also strong to be able to listen to your body and be like, hey, you need to pull it back a little bit. And to take that moment is like a sign of strength and vulnerability. And I think the vulnerability on that is even surpasses or gives you even more strength than if you were just to white knuckle it and just kind of like, put the pride out there and just be like, I'm just going to keep going. And then, the road at the end of that is just kind of total destruction too. So and I love that you bring up the strength training thing because I think that's one thing that I've just incredibly respected for you. On top of the many things that I respect about you, is how just diligent and consistent and on top of it you are with the strength training. I mean, it's just, and even like in those times where you have these big races, like you're still back in the gym like days after, like doing these like crazy workouts and sets and everything like that. And so has that kind of shifted or changed kind of going into Cocodona? Obviously not as much the commitment because I know you're still in the gym and everything, but have you switched up your routine maybe a little bit or kind of tried out some new things in the gym when it comes to having those strengths around Cocodona? Because I even mentioned how, you like to use it as a way to, like you said, react to your weaknesses in a way that's going to keep you stronger. And that's such a pivotal point. So how did that maybe perspective or strategy on strength training, like maybe evolve during your build up to Cocodona?
yeah, strength training is a part of my schedule year round, even in my off season. And it's something that I started doing when I was in high school, 15, 16 years old. And back then, at that time, it wasn't popular. It wasn't, common. I think what I knew about strength training at that time, was like picking up 2 and 5 pound, dumbbells. But, it was in some ways like a coping mechanism. It was also for me a little bit of an escape in a way that I could get an edge on because I really wanted to be a professional soccer player
Mm.
and soccer, getting a college soccer scholarship was like the one way that I knew to escape life. It was like the one way that I knew I could get out of the house and to fulfill a dream in a sport that I genuinely loved, because at that time is when women's soccer was just exploding. In soccer, it's not uncommon. Like the sport is, you need quick feet, you need to be explosive, powerful, strong, fast. I mean, you look at a team of soccer girls and they are solid, like they are strong. And soccer players just in general are incredibly fit. It's amazing the fitness that you have to be both enduring, and you have to have like you have to be able to sprint really fast too. So you're kind of well-rounded. And so strength training has never gone away,
Mm.
because on one hand, I love the feeling of being strong. And I kind of have a brain that like never shuts off, and weight training is like, it's so simple and like monotonous. Like I do find like a peace there in doing it, like something so simple of lifting a weight and setting it back down. Like there's nothing glamorous or like cool about it. I know now, like it's really neat seeing how strength is taking on like a different shape now, even in running. Like even seeing people who used to bash it and put it down are like, hey, I have a new routine for you. I'm like, awesome, bro. But like now it's like chains around the neck and like, what are all the different things we can do? Like it's so entertaining. And but I believe that all of us can strengthen. It should be a part of our life, regardless if you're training for competition or not, because it just sets us up to feel good throughout our day, whether it's lifting a child or being able to help a neighbor, or, carrying your groceries up that flight of stairs to your apartment. I mean, being strong feels amazing.
Mm.
And I think that their quality of life is just improved because of it. So it isn't something that goes away. And I do get asked that a lot. And I go through waves of how I lift in the gym. So in the off season, I lift 5 to 6 days a week in my off season. And this year, my off season was October to November. So I took 8 weeks off. And my off season is like, I love being active. I think that, I'm stand up paddling, I'm biking, I'm getting in the ocean. I'm just doing a bunch of fun stuff, but I'm not like on Strava and like watching how many calories are burned and how many hours like that I'm active. It's just like fun for me. And I love to lift heavy. So I lift really heavy in my off season. And then I also, I've been like customizing and creating routines since I opened up a fitness business back in 2007. And that is, that's like a full on creative outlet for me, is to create routines, in several different categories. So, routines for moms that only have 10 minutes and, 3 little kids at home that they can do at home, but then like, hard, fast Metcon style, and then like conditioning stuff. So that's kind of how I train throughout the year. So I look at what the race is, and I carve out my weight sessions to really reflect the race that I'm going to do.
Mm.
So for this one, because it's 250 miles and I'll be on my feet for several days, there was a lot of weight vest work. So whether that was heavy climbing with the weight vest on a stair mill or up a treadmill, fast hikes like around the neighborhood where I'm like power hiking with a weight vest. I did a lot of that, and way more than I have done in the past. And then in the gym, I was doing a lot more high rep stuff. So just more endurance lifting. I actually created one of the workouts. I released to everyone that I was doing that I do quite a bit. It's called the 1,000 rep workout, and it's 1,000 repetitions. And I laugh sometimes because people are like, dude, 1,000 reps, that sounds a lot. I'm like, how many steps are in 250 miles? That's a lot of reps. That's a lot of steps.
True.
So I'm just doing something a little different. I'm just putting a weight in my hand and I'm lifting it for 1,000 reps. But now think about your feet and all those steps. And so I'm very calculated in what I do in the gym, because I want to do 2 things. When I go in the gym, I'm working on both mind and body. And whether it's through like quiet concentration of being able to do something in a monotonous way. So 1,000 reps is also that side of it,
Mm.
because if you're listening and you're brand new to ultras, or you're not interested in ultras, but you're fascinated with this topic, yes, there is a point where you've been out on the trail for so long and you feel that. You're like, dude, how much longer do I have to go? Like, even if you've been doing it for a long time or you love it, you're really fit or you're moving fast. But, after like 8, 10, 12, 30 hours, that's a lot of reps. Like, you're fatigued. Your
Mhm.
brain is tired. You start to forget even what you need when you walk into an aid station. You're so tired. And so when I'm in the gym, I think about that. I think about, I'm going to do 1,000 reps. I'm just going to lift and put it back down, lift and put it back down, because there's a point in a race where you're actually so tired. You're like, okay, here's the next step. Okay, I'm going to get to the next tree. Okay, I'm going to get to the next rock. I'm going to focus. If you are not good at focusing, you've not trained your brain to have that quiet focus, concentration. It's very easy then to let the monkey come in and start dictating what should be going on in your mind. And you start to think of a whole bunch of stupid things, or even you start, putting yourself down, or start getting negative, or asking yourself, why am I doing this? I'm so tired. There's no way. I was so dumb. Why did I sign up? But when you hit that point of monotony and you feel tired and you're dragging along, it's really nice when you can say, I knew I was going to hit this point. That's why I did that workout in the gym. I knew I was going to come to a moment where I was so tired, or this feels even boring, or like this is taking forever. I trained for that. And so my gym sessions, it was very common. We're now 13 days out, so a lot of what I'm talking about is in retrospect, but very common to have 2 to 3 hours in the gym of lifting. And sometimes I'd mix in some stair mill with that. So I do like an hour and a half on the stair mill with a weight vest, and then I would just lift for an hour and a half to 2 hours. And the goal was to just completely crush every muscle, but then that was also would be like a lead up to, okay, the next day we're going to go run in the mountains for 6 hours and just climb for thousands of feet as much as we can. And knowing that a workout like that, a back-to-back workout like that, is going to better prepare me for mile 180. I'm not so concerned with mile 50, which I know in this race, the original course, which is different from what the
Mhm.
people ran last year, which was a much faster course. But the first, 42 miles of of this race are brutal, and it's a lot of climbing. And so, I think looking back on the strength training, I was thinking about, okay, the first part of this course is brutal climbing, so I did a lot of that. But I also need to train for mile 180, which is something I
Mhm.
don't know about, but I know I'm going to be very tired mentally and physically, and it is going to be hard to put one foot in front of the other. So both in running and in strength, I'd say that 80% of my training was probably done with an emphasis on fatiguing my body and reminding myself that I'm only going to feel fresh for so long. I need to train my body to be strong when I'm tired. And I think the
Mhm.
True Strong Project helped me do that. I think the True Strong Project was a really good setup for these 200s. Like I said, I knew I was eventually going to do 200s in these next couple of years, and so the True Strong Project was a way to kind of set myself up for that and identify a lot of my weaknesses. But the training for this has been really tricky because, a coach is going to tell you, like, you need to be fully recovered and always feeling good because you want your fast workouts to be fast and you want your hard workouts to be hard. You want to give it everything you got. But I kind of flipped the lid on that, and I didn't have a ton of workouts where I was fresh.
Mhm.
But what I did do is I had blocks of rest. So I
Mhm.
would do like 3 days straight of like this intense like recovery. And then I do 3 days of just insane, hard, high mileage, heavy lifts in the gym. And then I would recover really hard for like 3 days. So I've never done stuff like that before. But what I realized was in the research, there's a lot of people that have done these that are through hikers. And they are like amazing at doing 3, 4, 5, 800 miles. And it's these hard efforts for this period of time, and then they rest. And then some of those people, I was like, oh, I'm going to see if I can find their Stravas. And I'm like, oh, they're running like low mileage. Like they run low mileage and they absolutely crush these FKTs and these through hiking. And like, okay, there's some fast stuff in there. So I researched so many Strava accounts and like whatever I could find. And so some of that reflected in my training. Is it, is it going to pay me dividends and on race day? I don't know. I could end up being in the middle of the race and being like, dude, I overtrained, or I don't know.
Well, I first of all, I love that approach that you take on strength training, for just from feeling strong, from practicing the monotony, right? Because like 250 miles, like even in a 100-mile race, I felt like the monotony. And to think about that 2.5, like in like a 250-mile race, like you got to be able to have that, because to your point, like when your mind gets bored or when your mind gets like idle, that's when that monkey mind comes out. That's when those negative thoughts come out. And so, and I've been in the gym too, where I'm like, I don't even want to go to the gym, because I'm not, because I don't want to like do the strength training, but because it's boring. And like, but to your point, like now I'm like, hey, Joe, that's what you need to do to practice to be that sentry in your mind when it gets boring. So I love that aspect on there. And I love how you take the approach of being able to, put it on heavy, like, and to really practice moving forward, even on a tired body, throughout the strength training, throughout your training and everything like that. And to your point about will it pay dividends, I think like just from hearing like just your journey and your mindset and your training and everything that we know about you, Sally, like I think on that day it's going to be super special for you. And I'm so excited to hear and follow your journey, and excited to tune in too. And so for the last question here on the podcast to wrap things up, and I'm sure you know the question that's coming. I listened to the podcast before. Since the show is called Everyday Ultra, we want our listeners to be better endurance athletes every day. So the question to you, Sally, is what can our listeners do every single day to be a better endurance athlete? And maybe also, if they're listening and maybe going to do Cocodona, like what's something they can do to crush their next 200-mile race? So a little two-parter for the Cocodona series there.
Yeah. I think I always just like to encourage people to know that regardless of what their current fitness or ability level is that they are strong and capable of growing always. And I think sometimes I know I've been there both after I had my kids. I had emergency C-sections with both my kids. And man, that really felt like I'm never going to get back to the shape I was in.
Mm.
Like I've just been cut in half, and like my whole life has been turned upside down. I look at my body in the mirror and I'm like, I look like a fragment of what I was. And I think we are our worst critics. And so I just love just to really inject that into the world. Like you are so much stronger than you think you are. And sometimes it's just looking in the mirror and seeing like, I do have a lot of weaknesses, but weaknesses show me the areas that I can grow. And that should actually be exciting. Like, this is going to be fun. Let's see how strong we can get. If you're starting out at a 5K, like, yeah, let's see you do that 5K, but know that when you cross that finish line, you're not done. And, we have one finish line in life. That's when we're at the end. And I think that whether you're a seasoned runner or you're a beginner runner, you are capable of accomplishing something new every day. That's what the gift of life is. There's a purpose. If you open up your eyes, there's a purpose in that day, and you actually have no idea what that purpose is. So, don't be afraid of failing, because failures are just guides. They guide us along and show us, hey, this is how you can train a little bit better, or this is like where you can grow. Like this is what's going to inject the fire into that motivation that you're looking for. And so I think that, remain a student, know that you are strong, and never, ever, ever stop learning.
Oh, Sally, you got me fired up here. It's 10:15 where I'm at, and like now I'm not gonna be able to sleep because I'm just fired up. I want to run through a wall. That is amazing. But I just want to say I just appreciate you and this conversation so much, because it's just been so awesome, like following your journey and hearing again, like just you just taking this approach of being the learner, of inspiring people to be stronger, to do more, and to find that fulfillment and progress through the journey of just progressing and seeing what we're capable of. And it's so awesome to see you not just talk about it, but do it in your training, do it in the learnings that you're doing, and doing it by, throwing yourself in the first 250-mile race, and then it reiterating the learnings and going into the next one and the next one. Like, I'm just so excited for this journey. And by the way, for anyone listening, please follow Sally, like on all the social platforms, YouTube, her podcast, the film. Like, I'm going to post all the links in the show notes. Please follow along, because she's just so inspiring if you aren't already. And Sally, I know that you are going to crush it at Cocodona, and I'm so excited for you, my friend. And thank you again for coming on the show. This was one of my favorite episodes, and you are one of a kind, my friend. You're going to crush it.
Thank you, Joe. And I hopefully will get to meet you because you're going to be out there pacing. I hope that I will get to see you, whether
Absolutely.
before, during, or after. I'm going to look for you. But
Oh, I'm
thanks.
going to look for you too. And if you hear like someone screaming "Go Sally" like down the trail, like with like a headlamp at the night, that'll be me just going nuts for you.
Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you. And thanks again for coming on. Okay, where's the